I recently saw a video with the title that said, "Biscuit jointers are completely useless." It credited the popularity of the biscuit jointer in part to Norm Abram of the New Yankee Workshop, who never seemed to make anything that didn't contain at least one wooden biscuit. So I wondered, why would a master carpenter like Norm Abram be so fond of a tool that is completely useless? The answer, of course, is that biscuit joiners are not completely useless. They're either just misunderstood, or they simply don't fit into everyone's workflow. So I wanted to add to the discussion of what I think is the real value of a biscuit joiner. I'll tell you whether it's worth investing in one, I'll give you a few tips, and I'll show you something I see folks do all the time that you should never do with a biscuit joiner. Though they're stronger than some people give them credit for, biscuits shouldn't be confused with loose tenons like dominoes or even a good dowel joint. You never saw Norm trying to connect legs to a table or chair with biscuits. They aren't strong enough. What you did see him do was use biscuits to edge glue panels to assemble casework, boxes for cabinets and chests. In these applications, the biscuits add little strength, but they greatly assist in assembly. Well-cut biscuit slots will help your parts go together perfectly flush and prevent them from slipping out of alignment when you add glue and clamps. That can mean faster, stress-free glue-ups and a lot less sanding later. Notice I said well-cut biscuit slots. If your biscuit fits too loosely so it wobbles in the slot, it's not going to help you align anything. Biscuits are meant to absorb glue and swell for a tighter fit, but even without glue, a biscuit should not fit too loosely in the slot. Poorly fitting slots are usually caused by a bad biscuit jointer. The cutter may not run true, or the fence might not remain rigid, and this can create a slot that's wider than the thickness of the blade and too loose for the biscuit. Another problem may be the biscuit itself. They can shrink or expand based upon the climate, so you have to keep them in sealed containers. If your biscuits usually fit well, but seem a little extra loose on a dry day, spritz them with a little water to swell them a bit. This is especially useful if you don't intend to use glue, which would swell them inside the slot as well. If it's a humid day and your biscuits have to be hammered into the slots, throw them in the microwave for a minute or two of drying. Of course, I'm not saying biscuits should be used in every joint. There are other ways to align your workpieces. In fact, most of the time, you really don't need them at all. But they can be really helpful in large glue-ups, like big casework or giant panels for countertops or tabletops. Recently, we were edge gluing thick walnut planks for some counters, and without biscuits, it would have been very difficult to force out the bows and get things together before the glue started to set up. The biscuits didn't replace the cauls to keep the panel flat while it dried. It just made things a lot easier to align. Of course, there are some downsides to using biscuits as well. For one thing, if you cut the slot too close to the outer edge of a workpiece, over time the biscuit can shrink more than the panel itself. If the biscuit was glued in its slot, as it shrinks, it can pull down the wood fibers and create visible indentations in the finished surface, so you have to install them properly. Now here's something I see people do all the time with their biscuit joiners. This image is from an early episode of the New Yankee Workshop. Norm himself was guilty of this. The cutter on a biscuit joiner is like a small saw blade, and just like a table saw, it can bind in a kerf and kick that piece of wood out of your hand, leaving nothing between you and the cutter. I know the blade is designed to retract, but dirt and corrosion can slow that spring mechanism. Do you really want to see if your hand gets to the blade before it's withdrawn? Don't do that to your biscuit. You don't want to risk it. A biscuit joiner is a useful tool, but remember, a biscuit's not a tenon. Think of it as a spline. It'll help you align project parts, but it won't add a lot of strength to the joint. Is that enough to justify buying a biscuit joiner? No. But it is enough to justify borrowing one from a friend once in a while. Just make sure it's a good one. A cheap biscuit joiner is worse than none at all. If you find yourself using it a lot, offer to buy it from your friend, because he's probably not using it at all. Bottom line is a biscuit joiner is a tool that can be very useful if it's used properly and if it fits your personal workflow. Steve Ramsey isn't a fan, Norm Abram is. You have to decide which category you fall into. Now before you head to the comments and tell me that Steve made a follow-up video that acknowledged some of these things I just said, I saw that. But I decided to post this anyway because I think it adds to the discussion. See you next time. Power carving is a blast. You should try it sometime. Grab some scrap wood and some carbide burrs from Sabertooth power carving tools and just give it a go. You may be surprised what you're capable of, like this folk art eagle I made from 2x6s. Check out what Sabertooth has to offer at the link below this video. Wait, don't go yet. If you're new here, please subscribe and remember to ring the bell. I would really appreciate that. Give us a thumbs up, or better yet, leave us a comment. I always read them. And be sure to check out the latest issue of Stumpy Nubs Woodworking Journal. It's always packed with tips, tricks, and tutorials designed to make you a better woodworker.